After Kevin received a call from an emergency room relating that Lily had been taken there under mysterious circumstances, he stopped at nothing to get back from a visit at Brett Stewart's Myriad headquarters to be by Lily's bedside, though there he yet again had to battle with his mother-in-law Dorothy to ensure that Lily's health was protected. Assured Lily was fine, he took her to the rooftop of the hospital where he had a helicopter waiting. "Since when do you have access to a helicopter?" "I'm full of surprises. I won't ruin the mystery." Kevin grinned. Arm in arm, they walked over to the helicopter, which was being guarded by a pilot in a leather jacket and aviator sunglasses.
"Excuse me, how did you two get up here? This is a private landing pad. I'm waiting for my client who hired this bird for a ride home,"
the pilot said in a loud voice. Kevin nodded. "That's me. I'm your client." The man threw back his head and laughed.
"Yeah, right. Look at you. Those dirty jeans, that worn-out shirt, you couldn't afford to ride in this thing if you mortgaged your house for it."
Kevin wasn't fazed. It wasn't the first time he was underestimated, and honestly, he liked it that way. "So, you're not going to fly us home?"
"No way."
Kevin looked at the man, then at his wife, and said, "Suit yourself." He tried to lead Lily past the pilot, but the pilot tripped him on his way.
"I said you're not taking that bird anywhere, kid."
The pilot spat at Kevin's feet. "I see. In that case..." With the speed and agility of a striking snake, Kevin butted the pilot in the chin with his flat palm, sending the pilot spinning off balance.
"You rodent!"
The pilot lunged at Kevin, fist cocked back and ready to hit him with a right hook across the face, but Kevin was too quick. He stepped back and out of the pilot's range with ease, instead grabbing the fist coming at him and yanking it forward and ducking down, hitching the pilot up over his shoulder. "Who's the pilot now?" Kevin cried, spinning around and throwing the pilot to the ground.
"What the hell?"
The pilot stood, ready for another go, and came at Kevin with a spinning kick. But Kevin was ready. He planted one foot behind him and shoved his palms outward, sending a force field of air at the pilot, who was swept off his feet and launched high over Kevin and Lily's heads. Kevin was ready to grab him by the scruff of his leather jacket and send him pounding into the concrete roof of the hospital when, to his surprise, Lily reached an arm out instead and did that exact move. The pilot lay unconscious between them, and Kevin looked up at his wife with awe. "How did you do that?" Lily shrugged. "It just seemed like the right thing at the moment. Was it too much?" The pilot's body was unmoving, but it was also not bleeding out or too badly damaged. "I think it was just enough," Kevin told her. They left the pilot where he lay and hopped into the helicopter, strapping themselves into the pilot and co-pilot seats. "Now what? We can't fly this thing." Lily looked behind them to see if the pilot had stirred, worried about their escape. "Who gave you that idea?" Kevin reached between their seats for the control lever and flicked on the propellers. With ease, he lifted the helicopter off the roof and jutted it forward. They were flying. Lily went from bewildered to ecstatic, and she let out a laugh that reminded Kevin why he fell in love with her. Kevin looked at her. "Are you glad you chose me over your mom?" Lily nodded. "I've definitely made the right choice." Back at their penthouse, Kevin got Lily set up and comfortable on a luxurious couch in the living room. He knew it was still important that she rest and relax after her fainting spell, which she had when she learned Kevin was almost poisoned by her mother Dorothy. Kevin put on Lily's favorite movie and surrounded her with her favorite snacks and drinks. They were waiting for Rachel to tend to Lily when Kevin turned to his wife. "I want to promise you right now that I'm going to be more present in the matters of our marriage and our future family. If we have children one day, I want them to know their father is not only a great man, but a great husband. I know you've been through a lot of danger because of me. That was one thing your mother got right. But it's my new priority to set us up for a future where that doesn't have to be a threat. Do you trust me, Lily?" Lily nodded, beaming at him. "Of course I do. It made Lily happy to realize that for the first time in perhaps the entire course of their marriage, that she actually meant it. She did trust Kevin. Kevin squeezed her hand. I'm just as committed to this marriage as I was on our wedding day. I promise you that. He kissed her just as Rachel showed up at the front door. Hey, Lily, how are you feeling? I came to watch movies and veg out with you on the couch. Rachel shrugged off her jacket and tossed her shoes aside, jumping onto the couch next to her friend. Thanks for coming, Rachel, and thanks for getting Lily to the emergency room as soon as possible, Kevin said. That's what friends do, and I knew it wasn't major. I even thought her fainting might be, well, good news, Rachel said with a certain gleam in her eye as she looked at a couple who were clearly in love. By the way, Kevin, I think someone outside was looking for you. Kevin looked out the window at the balcony attached to their apartment and saw, with a jolt, the Night King staring back at him. Oh, Rachel, would you do me a favor and bring Lily to your place to recuperate? What's wrong? Is everything okay, Kevin? Lily held his hand tighter, trying to crane her neck to find what he was looking at. Yes, everything is fine. I just think you might be safer there for now. You never know if your mother might come looking for us. I think that it's best that you stay at Rachel's just for today, Kevin assured her. He never knew what the Night King might be here to tell him, and it was best that Lily was not nearby when he learned. Rachel and Lily packed up their snacks and left, and Kevin went out to the balcony to meet the Night King. You'll be pleased to know that my wife is recovering, Kevin opened. The Night King sighed, his jaw set in a rigid hold. I think we can skip the cozy catch-up, Kevin. I'm here with a warning. Of course. What happened? Kevin gripped the railing, looking out over his city as he spoke. Whatever it was, he was ready to face it head-on. The Night King stared at Kevin as he spoke with eyes that looked like they hadn't blinked in 1,000 years. It's not what has happened, but what is about to happen. The Kessler family is currently on their way to Chicago. I don't suppose they're here to see the sights. Kevin nodded grimly. You're correct. They are here for another shot at ending you and avenging the humiliation you caused them in your brawl so long ago. You need to prepare yourself. Kevin realized this would throw a wrench in his plans to make his marriage his top priority. He would have to do something else to secure his family's future before the Kesslers arrived and attacked. Are they operating alone? He asked. If Kevin was going to fight back, he would have to know the full scope of the threat. And just as he suspected, the Night King shook his head. There is a traitor with useful insight and information helping them. Be careful of who you let come close to you. You have been betrayed. Kevin gripped the railing harder. Why did the Kesslers always have to make things so personal? Do you know who it is? Who has not stayed loyal to me? The Night King lowered his gaze. I have a hunch, but that is all. It will be up to you to find them out and cut the poison branch off your tree. It could be someone close to you or one of your other enemies. Good luck, Kevin. As quickly as he had appeared, the Night King vanished and Kevin was left alone on his balcony. Now what do I do? Since I began working at my family company, Williams Media, there have been people fighting for its control. There's always competition and always someone willing to betray another for their own success. If I'm going to keep my family safe and prosperous, I will have to pursue a legacy outside of the family business. Kevin took a deep breath. I will have to strike out on my own and establish a legacy I can pass down to my future children without fear that they will be ousted by someone else. I need to make sure that I beat my enemies. Speaking of which, Kevin had to start thinking about ways to combat few remaining members of the Kessler family, which had been almost wholly taken apart after Kevin stood up to their patriarch who committed suicide in prison rather than face his crimes. They're on their way to Chicago now, so I need to find out how many of them are coming and where they are setting up camp. If I know where they are staying and operating, I can spy on them and stay one step ahead of their plans. I may have beat them in physical battles in the past, But my real strength is my ability to outsmart them and outfox them. Kevin had his plans: start tracking the Kesslers and establish his own company. For both of these, he would need help from his enforcer. Time to call upon Dalton Steele. Now that Kevin's wife Lily was safely at her friend Rachel's home resting and recovering, Kevin could focus on what the Night King had just told him. The Kesslers were on their way to Chicago, specifically to take him out, and they had someone working for them who had betrayed Kevin. Dalton came over as quickly as he could, and Kevin brought him into his study. It was time to establish an office space for Kevin's new company that he would be building independently from his family, so that he could pass it down to his future children.
"What do you need, boss?"
Dalton asked, standing in front of Kevin's desk at attention. Dalton and Kevin had made amends. When Kevin needed aid in Washington, D.C., while he established new reaches of his empire there, Dalton had been annoyed that his longtime friend and ally had not beckoned him to the city for help and protection, and instead relied on his vanguard and Radiance troops. Even at the greatest heights of power such as those Dalton and Kevin had, there could be misunderstandings between men, and Kevin, in his great mind and heart, understood this better than any man. He knew that the lapses Dalton had made and explained to Kevin in time would be insurmountable to others. But Kevin also saw that Dalton had erred mostly in misreading Kevin's intentions. The two men were now more bonded than ever, and Dalton had made it clear that nothing would ever come between them again. And Dalton would drop even his most important personal and business activities should Kevin ask for his assistance at any time. "Dalton, I'm striking out on my own. Now that I've bested my Uncle Thomas and Williams Media, I don't need them anymore, and I can pull all of my energy into my family. The first part of that will be a new business venture. That is an endeavor that is completely under my control, though I know that to ensure the safety of Lily and my future family, I must never divert from the ultimate goal of gaining access to the upper realm. Only then will I be able to feel as though our legacy is secure. But in the meantime..." Kevin was spilling his words so fast that Dalton had to put a stop to his friend's ambitious ideas. Dalton nodded.
"What's the business venture?"
Kevin smiled. The idea had been forming since his time in Washington, when Kevin saw an opportunity to merge some of his greatest skills. And now that he was back in Chicago to be near Lily, he was ready to move full steam ahead. Kevin had become more and more excited about the prospect of bringing his unique abilities in herbalism to the masses, and setting up his own pharmaceutical company. If he could combine the herbalism that he was so good at with other technologies and advancements, there would be virtually no disease he couldn't cure or ability he couldn't bestow upon anyone who needed it. Plus, he would cement his legacy as being something greater than just overseeing a media empire. "It's a pharmaceutical company, Dalton. I need a state-of-the-art office with a fully equipped lab space for my pharmacists and researchers to work their magic. It also wouldn't hurt if this was the biggest building in town that could look down on those who doubted me in the past and who challenged my growing empire. They need to know that the guy they thought they defeated will always loom larger than they do. Good guys win."
"So you're done with the family businesses forever?"
Dalton was worried. The Williams family had a wide and expansive network, and if Kevin turned his back on them, he would no doubt make many more enemies in the process. If there was one thing that Dalton knew, it was how dangerous Kevin's enemies could be. Dalton had to bear the burden in his own heart that he had been one of those enemies for a while, and he'd carried out some horrible acts against this man, whom Dalton almost too late realized was the truest friend he'd ever had. But Kevin was determined. They can't be trusted. All the betrayals and power plays are not sustainable, and that's why I have to leave. Uncle Thomas had no problem mistreating my parents. That should have been my final straw. We were all ostracized, and now they've lost all their money and are hiding out in St. Louis again with the leader of the Myriads with a guard of Radiance members protecting them. I had moved them to Washington to be near me for safety, but now that I have returned to Chicago, I want them nearby but not in danger. Brett Stewart and the Myriads will surely protect them." Dalton could see the rage in Kevin's heart. Kevin continued with words that Dalton thought defined Kevin, even as his actions were covering so many different bases. "I will one day do to Uncle Thomas exactly what he did to me and my parents. and I will only then think that there is an end to my family ties. Dalton drove Kevin across town to the business district, where Chicago's most important and influential companies were headquartered. He knew a real estate developer from a few years back. Dalton used to be the Mr. Fix-It for anyone who needed some dirty work done, so he knew the ins and outs of Chicago real estate. That developer knew of a penthouse suite that had just opened up at the top of the tallest building around. Getting out of the car, Kevin looked up, leaning back to take it all in. The building was magnificent. The architecture style dated back to the 1800s and made Kevin think of the Gilded Age of Chicago. As the structure got taller, more modern floors were added that made the building flow seamlessly from past to present, ending in a metal spire that clawed at the sky, asserting its height and dominance. Now this is an office. Kevin chuckled, clapping Dalton on the shoulder. It was perfect, it was timeless, and it was all his. They got to the top floor where the developer was waiting for them at the reception desk. "Dalton Steele, as I live and breathe. Good to see you, you old so-and-so." The developer shook Dalton's hand, then turned to Kevin. "And, who is this?" Dalton introduced them.
"This is my boss, Kevin Williams. He's the one who will be buying the space from you. Kevin, this is Cillian Connell."
Kevin and Cillian sized each other up. Kevin didn't think this guy looked like much, but if Dalton gave him the okay, then Kevin wouldn't underestimate him. He had a thick head of gray hair and was taller than Kevin or Dalton and built a bit like a cop, with his pot belly and slack mouth. The Irish name told Kevin that his family had probably been in Chicago for many generations. He would treat this man respectfully, so long as he treated Kevin with equal respect. Cillian, on the other hand, did not have such a favorable impression of Kevin. He looked up and down at Kevin's usual casual attire and his youthful face and pulled Dalton aside. "Can we talk for a moment?" Dalton nodded and they moved a few paces from Kevin. What they didn't know was that Kevin could still hear them clearly, as the penthouse suite was empty and the echo sent their voices right into Kevin's ears.
"Who is this ant?"
Cillian asked. Dalton gave him a hard stare.
"He's much more than meets the eye. I would advise you not to underestimate him. I wouldn't bring you someone who wasn't serious about buying this place, all right? Let's all be nice and give the man a tour."
Kevin chuckled to himself. He appreciated Dalton sticking up for him. But if Cillian did anything else to disrespect Kevin, Kevin knew he could take his business elsewhere. Money talked in Chicago, and Kevin had more of it than anyone. "Are we ready, gentlemen?" he asked, clearing his throat to break up Dalton and Cillian's private conversation.
"Yeah, boss. Let's do this."
Cillian led them around the floor.
"So this is the reception area. There's lots of natural light, as you can see."
He pointed to the south-facing wall, which was made entirely of glass.
"Over here are some offices and a conference room. There's plenty of room for a company of any size. The last group who worked out of this place had 300 employees in-house."
Kevin nodded as they went. It was all looking good so far, but what he really needed to see was the laboratory. "What's the technical setup looking like? High-speed internet? Top-level security? I assume all of that is included," Kevin said, admittedly to intimidate the developer.
"Yes, it's all in the package,"
Cillian confirmed. "Good." Cillian led them to a large metal door that he opened with a key card.
"This is the entrance to the lab. You can set it up to let people in with their fingerprints with an eye scan or with a key like this one. That booth there is where an extra security guard will sit so that there's absolutely no chance of unauthorized personnel sneaking inside."
Now they were talking. Kevin could feel the power in him surging as he got excited about what they were about to see. The door slid open with a smooth whirring sound to reveal a state-of-the-art scientific laboratory. The floors were sleek white marble, and the lab tables and machinery were shiny steel. Cillian showed them around.
"These are the autoclaves, centrifuges, and homogenizers. You know, stuff to mix and separate different ingredients. Over here you'll find temperature-controlled rooms and enclosures for ongoing experiments. Aspirators, dry baths, incubators, it's all here. There's nothing you can't do in this lab, so long as you can afford it."
Cillian aimed another pointed look at Kevin like he was daring Kevin to ask about the cost. Kevin stared at him right back. "What are you insinuating?" Cillian held his hands up.
Nothing at all. It's just that, you know, you don't exactly look like a scientist, so I'm trying to keep things simple for you. What else would you like to see?"
Kevin puffed out his chest. He would show this guy who the real expert was. What about thermal cyclers? If we're going to be cloning, genotyping, and sequencing DNA, we'll need to amplify their segments. Wouldn't you agree? Cillian was caught off guard by that. Kevin had succeeded. The developer held his hands up in surrender and said, "Hey, whatever you say, boss. I'm not a scientist. I'm just reading off the fact sheet."
"Let's talk numbers, shall we?"
Dalton suggested. Cillian led them back out to the main office and into one of the conference rooms where he sat down across from Kevin and Dalton. Kevin was ready to battle it out in these negotiations, and Dalton was already cracking his knuckles, warming up his shakedown muscles in case Cillian tried any funny business. Cillian pulled 3 copies of a contract out of his briefcase and handed them out.
"For the whole shebang, this would be the entire suite plus all the bells and whistles I showed you in the lab. We're looking in the neighborhood of $3 billion.
Dalton actually scoffed.
"Bullcrap. For this place? We aren't even in the heart of the district and you're trying to squeeze billions out of my boss here? Are you going to give us a real offer or am I going to have to look elsewhere, Cillian?"
Cillian shook his head.
"Don't do all that, Dalton. This equipment is state-of-the-art. This penthouse suite is at the top of the best building in the country, let alone the city. And I have other offers coming in. So you don't get to tell me what to charge. I know the asset I'm sitting on and I won't be underpaid for it."
Right before Kevin's eyes, the civil face Dalton usually wore in public fell away, and the fire lit behind his eyes. Dalton's allegiance to Kevin was just as strong as it had ever been, and Kevin delighted in knowing that he could let his friend do the dirty work of a contract negotiation, as he eyed the laboratory where he would soon establish the most dominant pharmaceutical company in the country.
"You've got other offers? Well, so do we, you idiot. We've seen 3 properties today asking for less than $1 billion that are larger and newer than this place. Maybe you've forgotten who you're dealing with, but I got you a lot of money back in the day that you never would have secured for yourself. You owe me on this."
Cillian rolled his eyes.
"I employed you and you did a job. I owe you nothing. But if you don't want to continue these negotiations, then we can pack it up now and go our separate ways."
Dalton turned to Kevin.
"Boss, would you mind giving us a moment to discuss? It won't take long."
Kevin nodded. "You got it, Dalton." He left the room and sat down on an armchair outside of it. Through the windows into the conference room, he could see the back of Dalton's head as well as Cillian's face while they spoke. As he watched, Cillian's face went from relaxed to annoyed to downright terrified. His eyes widened, and Kevin could have sworn his skin got paler and paler as the seconds dragged on. Finally, Dalton reached across the table with his hand held out. Cillian shook it, still looking spooked.
"Boss,"
Dalton called. Kevin went back into the room and resumed his seat.
"Good news, boss. Cillian realized his numbers were incorrect."
Cillian was striking out lines from the contract with fervor as he slid it back to Kevin with a new final cost. $900 million. Kevin shook Cillian's hand too. "You've got yourself a deal." He signed the contract. Cillian left and Kevin and Dalton got back in the car to go home. Riding shotgun through the city, Kevin pulled out his phone. If he was going to have the most prosperous business in the city, he would need to assemble his crack team. First on his list, Olivia Rafferty, his protege. He dialed her number. "Olivia, it's Kevin. How's DC treating you? Good? Well, then I hate to break your heart, but it's time to pack your bags. I need you here. That's right. Chicago needs us." Kevin called upon his once again loyal friend Dalton Steele to oversee the search for suitable office and laboratory space for Kevin's pharmaceutical business. The developer of a remodeled skyscraper, Cillian Connell, only grudgingly showed Kevin and Dalton a gleaming new penthouse space, assuming that Kevin lacked the funds for the rent, before Dalton had a private conversation with Cillian to remind him who he was dealing with, and to make the rent magically drop by billions of dollars per month. When Kevin arrived home, he thanked Dalton for his time and went up to his penthouse. "I can't wait to call Lily and finally have an evening together after so long. If I'm going to promise to work harder on being more present for her and our marriage, I want to deliver on that promise." Kevin got inside and paced around his living room thinking about his next move. I've established an office and lab space for my new pharmaceutical company. Now I will have that company to pass down to my future kids and a legacy for my wife and me to leave behind. My protege Olivia will be here soon to help me run it, and I'll have all the more time to spend with my wife Lily, making our marriage my top priority, Kevin thought. While he knew that his financial success was an important part of his legacy, he also knew that in time, he would have to return his attention to the upper realm. Only by achieving entry into the upper realm could he assure himself and Lily's family's eternal protection. Dalton had secured him a great deal, and while it wasn't cheap to acquire the lab and the office, it would all be more than worth it in the long run. I'll be changing the course of human history in that lab. There have been many battles between man and nature, but illness will no longer be one of them. Man wins. He sat down on the couch, starting to feel tired after a hectic day, when he heard something in his clothing make a crackling noise. Kevin reached his hand into his back pocket and pulled out a folded slip of paper. Where did this come from? I didn't put this here. He unfolded it and read, "Your presence is requested at the Healing Art School. Immediately." How did that even get in there? Kevin didn't notice anyone slipping it into his pocket on the street or at the office that he had just purchased. Then again, Wayne Ford and Harley Shepard usually requested his presence in mysterious ways. Come on, Kevin thought. He was just about to go to Rachel's and pick up Lily for a romantic evening together. But a trip to the Healing Art School to visit his old mentors was usually a productive use of his time. He hadn't visited the Healing Art School in quite some time now. He had once been the top student there, but had long since spread his wings and accomplished much more beyond its walls. Wayne Ford and Harley Shepard still thought of themselves as having some territorial rights over Kevin, considering that they were his first official teachers when he began his herbalism studies. But they were not about to try and lay a claim to Kevin. Instead, these two mentors continued to hope that Kevin's growth and success would benefit them and their school, and help to save the foundation itself should the Pinnacle yet again make a move to return and take control of Chicago and beyond. Kevin arrived at the Healing Art School by early evening, and the sun set behind the building as he entered. The massive castle-like structure reminded him of the Tower of London, and he might be the prisoner brought in for execution if he didn't know that behind the school's walls was a force of good and not evil. No, he understood why Wayne and Harley were summoning him, or at least he had a hunch.
Kevin, good to see you, my boy.
Wayne Ford stood as Kevin entered the meeting room. The table in front of him was made of black stone and reflected the flickering light from the real candle chandelier hanging from the ceiling. Thank you for the invitation. I've been meaning to pay you two a visit for a while now, Kevin said, taking a seat. Is that so? Harley asked from the other end of the table. Good to see you, Harley. Always a pleasure. Kevin was ready to defend his idea to start a pharmaceutical company. Whatever these guys threw at him, he could handle it. After all, they had taught him everything he knew, and he had only expanded on that knowledge and become more powerful since he'd gone his own way. Wayne shushed Harley and said,
It's come to my attention that you're opening a pharmaceutical company, Kevin. I wanted to talk with you about that because obviously your herbalism skills come from the things we've taught you, and we want to ensure that those practices will be protected going forward. We at the Healing Art School have never ventured into pharmaceuticals for a reason. The nature of them is at odds with herbalism. Kevin was expecting this. He knew how protective Wayne and Harley were about their methods. Their students were selected after an exacting application process because only certain people could be trusted with the gifts and powers the Healing Art School imparted. The idea that these things might be accessible to everyone was bound to make them nervous. I was thinking that I am uniquely positioned to extract small amounts of the power of herbalism to target acute illnesses and chronic health problems. I don't see herbalism as being at odds with pharmaceuticals at all.
In fact, pharmaceuticals are the natural evolution of herbalism. I just want to bring back some of the magic and power that was lost over the years," Kevin asserted. Harley looked up at Kevin. "Our herbalism, this school in fact, thrives because of its discretion. When the world finds out about the things we can do, they will strip it from us like natural resources and commercialize it to a degree that might make a mockery of our practices. Does that worry you?" "Wayne, Harley, with all due respect, I don't think you're giving me enough credit here. I wouldn't just open a lab, slap some power pills in a bottle, and pass them out over the counter. My company and my scientists will work to make specific and powerful medicines to be delivered to people in areas in the world who can most benefit. We're talking about eradicating diseases that have crippled populations. It will be highly controlled and the methods will never be disclosed. I've thought of everything. Don't you worry," Kevin insisted, leaning toward Wayne at the other end of the table.
"It would have been appreciated if you had asked our permission first,"
Wayne told him. Kevin shook his head and continued to come up with solutions on the spot. "That's why I've been meaning to pay you a visit. I'll need chemists and scientists to work for me who know their herbalism as well as you do. I want to employ students of yours, past and present. If we are all aligned on what the powers of herbalism are and to what extent it is appropriate to use them, we won't have any issues at all." That caught Wayne and Harley off guard. Kevin had outwitted them.
"Oh, is that so?"
Wayne asked. "Of course. You'll be training the hands that make the products," Kevin nodded.
"Well, I guess that we could reach an agreement if that be the case. How many will you need?"
"I already have my protege, Olivia Rafferty, on her way. She showed herself to be a skilled herbalist in the Herbalist Society's competition that I won. I'll take half a dozen more herbalists to start." Wayne and Harley exchanged looks before Wayne turned back to Kevin.
"Fine. But there will be ground rules. You cannot put the proven effectiveness of herbalism under the efficiency of technological advancements. Our teachings come first."
Kevin nodded. "You have my word." Kevin left the Healing Arts School before they could change their minds. He was satisfied with his work, convincing them to relent, and getting students from the school to work for him was the best-case scenario. Who else would be able to yield the herbalist powers to create their products? What's next? I suppose I should start looking for the Kesslers. They were on their way to Chicago this morning, and I don't know how fast they might get here. And I can't let them find out what I'm doing next with my pharmaceutical company. They have a lot of influence in Washington, D.C., and if I'm going to succeed in pharmaceuticals, I need to have good relationships with the FDA, the CDC, and the government in general. The Kesslers could ruin all of that for me and stop me before I get started. This company will have to stay on the down low for a while. And the Night King said the Kesslers were working with someone who had betrayed me. I'll have to get to the bottom of that soon." But then Kevin remembered Harold Smart, the pharmaceutical giant he had met in Washington, D.C. "Harold likes me. I totally won him over when we met. If I can talk to him before the Kesslers find me, I'll be able to establish a good standing in the pharmaceutical world." Kevin kept walking, almost back to the car. Now, finally, he could have his evening with Lily and get some rest. Tomorrow, he would hit the ground running with the new company in his search for the Kesslers. But before Kevin could open the car door, he saw a shadow dart across his periphery. What the? He crouched down and peered over the roof of his car, trying to track the figure. He couldn't see anything. But suddenly, he heard a snap and whipped around. Out of the shadows, an assassin was running straight at him. Kevin had just left the Healing Arts School after successful negotiations with Wayne Ford and Harley Shepard. They weren't completely convinced that their school's mandates wouldn't be compromised, but they had agreed not to disturb Kevin while he set up his pharmaceutical company, so long as Kevin hired their students to fuse their herbalism teachings with his other medicinal practices to create the most powerful and effective drugs possible. Kevin thought he was finally free to spend a romantic evening with his wife Lily, when out of nowhere he found himself being ambushed by an assassin. The shadowy figure was running straight toward him, and after a quick scan, Kevin could tell this attacker's power levels were higher than most he had faced before. The vague light coming off of the figure was familiar, however, and Kevin knew this was a secluded valley assassin. He had taken them down in the past, but it wouldn't be as easy this time unless he used the right strategy. This figure was strong, but Kevin could beat him if he could outlast him. Endurance would be the name of the game. The assassin was close now, and he lunged at Kevin, a dagger held high over his head. Kevin turned into his reflexes and slid to the side, pulling the assassin with him by the waist, using the momentum to spin them both around and flinging the shadowy body away from him. Kevin took a breath and thought, I know I can't kill him because I need to find out who he's working for. If it's the Kessler family sending assassins to do their dirty work, then he can tell me where they are operating out of. I just have to tire him out and force him to surrender. This might be a long one. The assassin was up as quickly as he went down, and just when Kevin was getting ready for the next attack, the figure pulled a series of daggers and stars out of his clothes and started whipping them at Kevin two at a time. Kevin summoned his spiritual energy and quickly deployed a series of flicks and configurations of his hands and wrists that forced the stars and daggers to divert in their path and fly over his head like they'd been picked up by a sudden gust of wind. But they weren't being sent nearly as far as he wanted them to be. I can feel my power weakening. When was the last time I took a power pill? I'll need to assess my levels when this is over and make sure I'm equipped for the next attack, Kevin thought, though he had little time to let worry overtake him. For now, he would have to get out of the way. He made one final push to send the next pair of daggers out of his path, then leapt into the air and flew backward, flipping over his car and landing behind it. He could hear the stars and daggers sticking in the metal of the car where he had just been standing. Two of the daggers struck the car's front tires and the air was hissing out quickly. As the car hood sank lower, Kevin realized he was losing his hiding place. That's not good. Kevin had to go on offense now. He grounded himself and let his power surge through him, then lunged forward and grabbed the wrist of the assassin, pulling him forward to meet his chin with a strong uppercut. The assassin was lifted off the ground and flung over Kevin, who was still holding the attacker's wrist. He used the opportunity to tug the wrist downward, pile-driving the assassin into the ground. Kevin landed on top of him with a grunt and pinned his hands to the ground. Had enough yet? The assassin's eyes narrowed. Kevin could barely see his face under the now dark night sky, but he knew a sneer when he saw one. Instead of a response, the assassin jerked his head up, butting it into Kevin's nose, and used the temporary distraction to push Kevin off of him and to get up. They both scrambled to their feet, and the assassin came at Kevin again. This time he had ducked low to take Kevin out at the knees, but Kevin saw it coming and he jumped into the air once more, stomping on the top of the man's head to leverage himself further into the air, flipping backwards again and landing in front of him. This ends now. Kevin pulled out the night dagger and charged. When the assassin saw that he had a weapon, he scrambled backward onto his hands and feet like a crab. Kevin brought the dagger down, aiming for a thigh or an arm, something that wouldn't be fatal but would end their fight. The assassin dropped onto his back and tried to roll away, but Kevin pinned him in place by the shoulder, which his dagger sunk into with a sickening squelch. "Ugh!" The assassin cried, and Kevin yanked the dagger back out of him, thinking that the fight may be over at last. But the assassin rolled onto his good side and pulled out his last weapon, a length of wire between two wooden handles whose sole purpose was to strangle an opponent. The assassin threw the wire around Kevin's neck and crossed the handles tight, but instead of securing Kevin in a stranglehold, Kevin was able to spin out of the wire at the last moment, using his momentum to close the assassin and pin him back down. Kevin stuck the dagger in his thigh and sat on the man's chest. "Surrender!" The assassin spat in his face, but Kevin was not fazed. "Say it."
Fine. I surrender. You win. Take that blasted thing out of me.
Kevin shook his head with some surprise. He wanted to get information out of the assassin, but was uncertain whether the assassin would or could speak. He had mostly been confronted with stony silence as other Secluded Valley assassins unleashed their terror upon him. "Not until you tell me who sent you." The assassin was breathing heavily now and moving around trying to get out from under Kevin, but Kevin had him held down securely. "Who was it?"
Fine. You know who sent me. It was Mario Kessler. He's here. He's coming for you."
Just as Kevin had suspected, the Kesslers came all the way to Chicago just to send an assassin to finish him off. It was pathetic. What does he want? Where is he?
The lake. He's in the lake compound. He's there with a team of the world's best assassins. You won't stand a chance.
The assassin groaned, now trying to reach down to his thigh to pull out the night dagger. "You have no idea what I'm capable of," Kevin snarled. He pulled the dagger out of the assassin's thigh and ran, finding his car just beyond the tree line and racing back to the city. Kevin arrived at the lakeshore by dawn, and he watched as the sun crept up over Lake Michigan. The Kesslers' lake compound was on an island a good distance north of Chicago, and he would need transportation. He had called his enforcer, Dalton Steele, on his way back from the Healing Arts School, and as usual, Dalton had delivered. A one-passenger motorboat was waiting for Kevin at the shore with a note on it.
"Call if you need backup. Dalton."
Kevin had forgiven Dalton for the many infractions he had made against Kevin during his absence in Washington, D.C., but he had to admit that lording some guilt over his friend was a benefit. Any favor Kevin needed now would be quickly fulfilled by his ally who was back in his favor. Kevin climbed in and started the engine on a low speed, puttering out into the lake without drawing attention to himself from the fishermen who were flooding down to the shore to start a long day's work harvesting salmon. The beauty and simplicity of the scene made Kevin pause for a moment and almost forget the task at hand. In another life, maybe I would have a job like that. Something regular, something consistent, simple work on the land and in nature. But in this life, I've been given unique abilities that demand me to build my empire, and I can't deny them. My destiny is too powerful to ignore." He ripped the motor into high gear and cruised the rest of the way to the compound. The island was tucked away in a cove at the Wisconsin border. The water beat against its shores from all directions, and its cave-like structure gave it the ultimate geological protection. "I can get in just fine, but I'll have to be sure to make myself a clear path out," Kevin noted, tethering his boat to a sapling that branched out over the lake. Kevin climbed up the cliff-like side of the island. The Kessler compound sat near the top, a structure made from dark rock and sea glass that blended into the island itself. Kevin came from the back, then entered the mouth of the cave that protected the structure and skirted the side of the compound silently. The Kesslers think that right now their assassin is holding me off, or worse, killing me. They won't be expecting this visit. I have the element of surprise. He slipped inside an arched entrance and found himself in a dark hallway. The sound and smells of the lake filled the space, giving the air around him a damp quality that made everything feel very quiet, until he heard them. Kevin rounded a corner and saw in front of him one door, and it was open just a crack. Voices seeped out of it like thick ink from a fountain pen.
"Your father is the one we have to thank, I understand."
That voice was Mario Kessler, no denying it. But what made Kevin freeze in his tracks was the one that responded. "I know, and I'm ready to begin." It was none other than Kevin's cousin, Ethan Williams. Kevin had made it to the Kessler compound on the island in Lake Michigan after defeating the Secluded Valley assassin they had sent after him. He was now lurking outside of the room where he had heard Mario Kessler talking to Ethan Williams. Ethan was the traitor that the Night King had warned Kevin about. The compound was damp and dark. situated inside the cave atop the tiny island in the lake. Kevin was uneasy about what might happen if he had to escape quickly. The only way back to his boat was down the side of a steep cliff. But before he left, he had to get a good idea of Mario and Ethan's plan to thwart him, and he would then be able to sneak out of the compound undetected and start working on a counterattack. And if he had heard correctly, Mario Kessler had just said that Ethan's father was the one who had put them together.
My biological father, Joshua Hill, has been a murky figure, and he's hard to pin down, but I can't say that he hasn't been useful when he wants to be. I'm glad he connected us,
Ethan was saying to Mario. Ethan was indeed glad to be partnered with someone who hated Kevin as much as he did. It was an error Ethan knew to align with Dalton Steele, who had seemed to have the same goals as Ethan to destroy Kevin and his empire. But though Dalton plotted and schemed with Ethan, he had an about face laid in their partnership and returned to Kevin's fold while betraying Ethan. Ethan was certain that Mario was not going to trick him as Dalton had. Mario chuckled.
Yes, seems like your father Joshua is holding a grudge against the Williams family, which is a sentiment I share. It's always nice to find an ally lurking around.
Ethan agreed.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend, as they say. So what are we going to do about our Kevin problem?
Kevin's ears pricked up. He had a feeling his name was going to come up. After all, Mario Kessler had come to Chicago just to take him down. Even though he had sent an assassin rather than face him like a real man, Kevin was keenly aware that he was the target. What was more surprising to Kevin was that Mario Kessler had found a new ally in none other than Kevin's cousin Ethan. Kevin wasn't about to call Ethan ungrateful, but when Kevin did hand over a high-grade medicinal pill to Thomas Williams that would enable Ethan to get out of the wheelchair he'd had to use since Kevin had broken almost every bone in his body, it seemed as though Ethan might have rethought making more attacks on Kevin. Now it appeared that Ethan's equally vengeful biological father, Joshua Hill, had put Ethan into contact with Mario Kessler, who blamed Kevin for bringing down his family's DC empire. Though Kevin knew that two foes working together were harder to beat than one, he also knew that neither Ethan nor Mario had the skills, intelligence, or levels to make it a fair fight. Ethan, after all, had worked for years and only managed to get to level 1. Kevin could sense from the aura coming out of Mario that he, too, had not leveled up much beyond that in the time since they'd last battled each other.
That's the ultimate question, isn't it? What I've noticed is that no matter what we throw at Kevin Williams, he comes out of every physical battle nearly unscathed. In fact, I have an assassin out searching for him right now, and if Kevin is able to escape, that will confirm my fears that he is not an easy man to kill,
Mario explained.
And what if he is impossible to beat in battle? How will we take him down?
Ethan asked. Kevin thought, I'd like to know the answer to that too, you fools. I can defeat fighters well above my own level of power, but they're never smart enough to outmaneuver me or outlast me. With a jolt, Kevin heard footsteps that he thought were coming from behind him, but he realized that there were just more than 2 people in the room he was standing outside of. Someone had just walked by the door. Kevin held his breath until the steps passed. Being discovered lurking in the shadows would begin a battle before Kevin had found out all the information that he needed about the plot against him. Mario continued.
Kevin is an intellectual creature as well as a strong one. I believe the key to taking him down is to go after his empire, something he cares about that will destroy him intellectually first, and then we can defeat the physical man.
Ethan chuckled darkly.
That is devious. What will we attack first?
That's the part we have to figure out. Kevin has cut ties with his family and the Williams Company. His Uncle Thomas is no longer someone he trusts. That makes me think that he has started his own venture. We know he's been training as an herbalist, so I believe that he will be working on that.
Kevin was surprised. Am I that predictable? Someone else in the room cleared their throat, but Kevin couldn't tell who it was. Likely another Kessler goon. Ethan sounded confused.
Yes,
Kevin did tell my supposed father Thomas that he was forever going to leave the Williams Company and make his own path. Without the backing of my family's money and influence, I don't see how he can succeed on his own. That makes things easier for me in my quest to become the most powerful Williams. Paternity be damned, line of succession be damned, that empire belongs to me. What's this herbalism business? How long has Kevin been working on it?
It's my understanding that he's become quite powerful. He refined a pill just before leaving DC that had him getting to level 7.
Ethan appeared shocked by this news, much to Kevin's delight. Level 7? Ethan exclaimed. I had no idea that he was that powerful.
That's why we can't defeat him in a battle. We need to break his spirit first by taking everything he has, then death will be the final blow. And if he's working at an herbalism company, there's definitely something we can do to disrupt him there.
Mario sneered. Kevin could hear the excitement in his voice as he realized a plan. What would that be? Ethan asked.
Mario laughed. Don't forget, Ethan, I am a Kessler. We were basically royalty in Washington, D.C. before Kevin directed his vengeance at me and my family and led us to ruin. But that will only be temporary. If Kevin wants to have an herbalism company and market his pills, he will have to go through the Federal Drug Administration, the Center for Disease Control, and all sorts of red tape in Washington. I can stop his success before it begins by using my connections. He won't know what hit him.
A chair scraped against the floor as someone stood up. A voice Kevin did not recognize said, "Sir, it seems we have a visitor." Out of nowhere, Kevin jumped as 2 large hands grabbed him under the armpits and lifted him into the air. Looking around him, he could tell these were Kessler henchmen, and sure enough, they dragged him into the room and dumped him at Mario's feet. Mario scowled down at him.
Well, your ears must have been burning. We were just talking about you."
"Kevin, how much did you hear?" Ethan asked, worry on his face.
Mario quickly turned to Ethan. "That hardly matters now. Come, Kevin, take a seat. Let's talk."
The henchman lifted Kevin back up and shoved him into a chair next to Mario and across from Ethan at the meeting table.
"I see the assassin I sent had no effect on you," Mario said, looking Kevin up and down.
Kevin had some dirt on his pants from the fight, but it was true. He had walked away mostly unscathed. 1,000 assassins wouldn't be able to take me, Mario. Although it seems like you figured that out already from what I heard. Kevin replied in a voice that seemed to be polite but was actually mocking Mario.
"So what is the key to your downfall? Do I need to rob you blind, kill your wife, turn everyone you love against you?"
Mario was just taunting Kevin, of course, and Kevin wouldn't stoop to his level. "Why don't you just fight me like a real man? Don't you want the satisfaction of beating me yourself? Or you, Ethan? You want my power. Take it from my cold, dead hands." Kevin never baited his villains like this, but he was having fun. "You might want to remember that though I cured you with a high-grade medicinal pill, you only needed that pill because I broke every bone in your body when you plotted against me." Ethan had more at stake here than just his own ego, which had no doubt been bruised by Kevin's continued success. He also had to worry about his life. Kevin could have killed him when he threatened to toss Ethan out of a 14-story hospital window, and Ethan hadn't forgotten the pain of having every bone in his body broken at Kevin's hands. But Mario had a grail too. Mario's father had taken his own life in prison because of Kevin. Kevin exposed his father for funding the orphanage that trained secluded Valley assassins and that ruined the Kessler Corporation and Mario's family's empire. Kevin would have to pay.
"Go on, Kevin. What is your weakness? We're dying to know."
Mario eyed him like an uncle teasing him about having his first crush. Kevin just shook his head. "I have none. You of all people should know that. Leave me alone. And if you touch one hair on my wife's head, I'll burn everything you own to the ground before you can say Kessler." Kevin warned him.
"I know what you're doing, Kevin. I know you're starting your herbalism business. I don't know what someone like you is going to do with all that power and responsibility, but I won't be giving you the chance to find out. You're finished."
Kevin maintained eye contact, refusing to give Mario any ground. "You don't know the first thing about my plans or my future or my legacy, let alone the extent of my power. Give it up. I will always best you."
"Why don't we try your physical strength one more time? I don't like your chances on this one, but do try and put on a good show for us, like the Roman gladiators did before they were ripped to shreds by the lions."
Mario flicked open a glass case that he had been hiding with his arm and flipped a switch within it. A clear enclosure that looked like a gigantic empty fish tank descended from the ceiling and spat out a ladder, which Mario and Ethan climbed up until they were inside the tank, watching Kevin being held back by henchmen below him. "Cowards! Where are you running to now? Are you that afraid of me?" Kevin wailed, fighting against the restraining hands holding his arms behind him. Then the table in front of Kevin shuddered and began to lower. Kevin realized it was actually retreating beneath the floor, and once it was on the way down, a panel of wood shifted over the top like a trapdoor sealing back up after its victim had already fallen through. Then even the henchman keeping Kevin held in his chair retreated and left the room. That can't be good, Kevin thought. For a long moment, everything was silent. Kevin stood up from his chair and listened hard for any creaking of floors or closing of doors, trying to anticipate where an attack was going to come from, because surely one would come. Mario and Ethan were quiet up in their box too. Kevin braced himself, mustered up all of his power, and prepared to unleash it at any moment. And then, all at once, a dozen assassins poured into the room from all entrances, surrounding Kevin and closing in on him fast. Kevin watched as the assassins closed in on him, tensing for his first move. He had just been caught at the Kessler compound spying on Mario Kessler and Ethan Williams, who were plotting against him. It sounded like they wanted to destroy his new pharmaceutical company and ruin his fortune and his expanding empire before killing him. But now they had unleashed a dozen assassins as one last attempt to end Kevin's existence. Mario and Ethan were now cheering from their glass enclosure on the ceiling. It would keep them safe while they watched Kevin's battle, or so they thought. Kevin was already working on a strategy to break the glass and pull them down into the middle of the battle. But for now, the assassins were so close he could feel their breath. So Kevin released a great amount of spiritual energy and he summoned the powers of his level 7 skills. And he jumped straight into the air, landing high up on the ladder that had taken Mario and Ethan to safety. The assassins that had been rushing toward him from all directions crashed into one another in his absence, knocking two of them unconscious. Kevin thought, these guys are all level 6 or higher. It's hard to tell when they're all coming at me at once, but they'll definitely be a challenge. 10 to go, he noted under his breath. He leapt from the ladder and landed hard on the neck of the nearest assassin, taking advantage of the moment when they were all looking around the room to locate him. His knee landed right on the fighter's pressure point and he dropped like a fly. 3 down. Kevin shot back up, planted his front leg, and grabbed the head of the assassin who had just approached him from behind. He flung the opponent's body over his own head, swinging the guy's boots into another assassin's face and forcing the head he was holding into the ground. 5 down. The next assassin approached with his short sword drawn, jabbing it forward at Kevin's gut. This one was clearly one of the most powerful, at a level that rivaled Kevin's own. Kevin hit the deck, then flung his legs around the front to take the assassin out at the knees. The assassin fell, his sword clattering across the floor, and Kevin scrambled for it. His hand made contact and he grabbed the hilt. The assassin stood back up and charged, but Kevin flipped over right at that moment, sword in hand, and the sword sunk into the man's chest, skewering him. 6 down. 2 approached next. One ducked to take Kevin out below the waist, and one wielded a dagger aimed at his head. They had watched Kevin jump and duck to avoid attack, but surely he couldn't do both at once. They were right. Instead, Kevin leapt forward, diving between their advances like a dog jumping through a hoop. He found the hole and threaded the needle, landing on the other side of the pair in a tuck and roll. When he popped up behind them, he grabbed both of their heads and slammed them together, then watched them drop. 8 down, 4 more to go. The next assassin had stolen Kevin's move and climbed up on the ladder. He leapt off and landed on Kevin's shoulders, wrapping his legs around Kevin's neck and trying to get the leverage to bring Kevin to the ground. But Kevin was too strong. He bent over and ran straight at the wall, charging like a bull, driving the assassin's head right into the stone. The legs around his neck loosened and the fighter slipped off of Kevin like a limp snake. 9 down. Kevin looked around and realized he had 1 moment free, so he used it to run to the fireplace and pull out the poker. Instead of using it on an assassin, though, he threw it across the room like a javelin, piercing the side of the glass case where Mario and Ethan were watching him fight. The front wall shattered into 1,000,000 pieces, and the floor cracked.
"We need to get out of here,"
Kevin heard Mario say, his voice no longer muffled in the enclosure. Mario and Ethan scurried out of the top of the container and up to the next floor of the compound. Kevin turned back to his fight. "Who's next? Come on!" he yelled, pulling his energy into his chest, ready to strike. 2 assassins reared up on either side of him, coming at him in full sprints. Kevin could sense that the 2 assassins nearing him now were not the top fleet. Their levels were 4 at best. These ones have lower levels. I won't waste too much energy on them. Kevin thrust his arms out on either side of him, letting the energy surge out of his palms and pulse threateningly toward his foes. They were blown back into opposite walls and slumped down. Only 1 more to go. But while Kevin was entering his final battle, Mario and Ethan were scrambling down the rock face outside the compound. "Where do we go? Our boat captain isn't going to be here to pick us up for hours," Ethan realized, looking up and down the shoreline helplessly. Mario, too, was scanning the empty waters of the lake. His compound had been compromised, and he needed to get out of there and find a new base fast.
"There. That must be how Kevin got here."
He pointed down to Kevin's small speedboat that was tied to a tree on the shore. The 2 men scrambled toward it, untied it, and sped off across the lake. Meanwhile, Kevin was still up in the compound, unable to find the final assassin. "I swear I counted 12 when they first came into the room, and 11 of them were knocked out or worse. Where is the last assassin?" As if the assassin could hear Kevin's thoughts, he darted out from behind the door where he had been hiding and charged at Kevin, swinging a weighted chain above his head like a lasso. Just as he approached, Kevin stepped to the side, shot his hand up in the air, and snatched the end of the chain. "Blue Storm technique." Kevin yelled this out loud both to spur himself on as the battle became more heated, and as a warning to his last attacker that he was about to unleash this legendary maneuver should their fight continue any longer. He whipped the lasso around, pulling the assassin off his feet, and flung him at the window. The man went through it feet first and flew off the side of the cliff and into the lake. "I can't stop and celebrate my win. I have to get out of here before anyone else shows up," Kevin thought. Kevin set off the way he'd come, down the hallway and around the corner, until he found the crack in the rock that acted as a door to the compound. But when he got to the beach, he saw his speedboat in the distance, carrying Mario and Ethan to shore. Those goons! Kevin assessed his other options. He could wait around for another boat, go back in the compound and look for some other type of raft, or he could swim for it. He scaled his way to the other side of the island and could see the shore of the cove. It was a few hundred yards away, but Kevin didn't want to find out what would happen if he stuck around for any assassins to rally and stage a second attack on him. "My energy is so low. I really spent myself in those battles, especially against the higher level assassins. But I need to stay alive and make it home safely to Lily. I won't let Mario and Ethan have the last word." Kevin slapped his face around to bring himself to attention, focused his energy on his arms, pulled off his shirt, and dove into the water. When Kevin got back to his new company's headquarters in downtown Chicago, a whole group was waiting for him to come in and address them. He had called Dalton on his way down the coast and asked him to assemble the Radiants. If Mario Kessler was assembling a team, so could Kevin. "Good evening. Thank you all for coming. There have been some serious developments in my camp that may soon have great consequences, and I need your help." The Radiant and Dalton watched as Kevin paced the front of the room, giving his speech. "Mario Kessler has returned to Chicago. He is here for one reason and one reason only, to kill me. The problem is that he has decided to take down my empire before that happens. You should also know that I have started a pharmaceutical company in partnership with the Healing Arts School. Now all of that potential is at risk. Mario has another trick up his sleeve. He's working with Ethan Williams, my cousin, a traitor." Kevin stopped pacing and stood firm, looking out at the assembly. "That's where you come in. I need you on the streets, surrounding the building and patrolling the coastline. We need eyes everywhere. I want to know of Kessler's whereabouts at all times. If he so much as goes for a morning coffee, I want to know about it. And of course, the strongest among you is to guard my wife Lily 24/7, Rachel as well. Their safety is your number one priority." The Radiants all nodded in agreement and filed out to take their positions. Dalton came over to Kevin and tapped him on the shoulder.
"You've never lost to the Kesslers before. I'm not worried."
Kevin looked at him. "Thank you, Dalton. We need one more member to join the team." Dalton cracked his neck.
"Who do you need? I'll find him."
"Larry Barnes. I haven't seen him since Washington, but I know he's out there. Larry Barnes has been a victim of circumstance and a pawn of too many evil people for many years. His past is a sad one, and he nearly fell prey to manipulation by Vincent Reeves and Mason Zimmerman in D.C. Though Larry almost betrayed me and was used to find out information about my powers for others who sought to bring me down, I know that his allegiance to me has, in time, grown to be unshakable. That I forgave him for his acts against me has only made him more loyal. I want him to run the lab and oversee the students from the Healing Arts School, plus my protege Olivia can learn from him. It's the dream team." Dalton nodded.
"I'll be back."
He left the office. Kevin pulled out his phone to see a text from Olivia, his protege. "Just arrived in Chicago. Where should I stay?" That was an easy question. Rachel ran the best hotel in town. Kevin sent Olivia the address and then stowed his phone away, grinning. It was all about to come together. Despite knowing that there was a deadly plot working against him in his own city, Kevin was more optimistic about the future of his empire than he'd ever been. Only a fool would doubt Kevin's determination. Kevin had defeated the 12 assassins in the Kessler's Lake compound, but now he was back in Chicago with no idea where Mario Kessler and Ethan Williams had escaped to. He sent the Radiants out to patrol the city for his enemies, guard Lily and Rachel, and report back to him about any movements. But Kevin couldn't ignore what he had learned at the compound. Mario and Ethan wanted to attack his company first. Therefore, he had to get the team established and launch this thing so it couldn't be stopped before it began. Olivia had arrived in Chicago and was on her way to the office now, and Dalton was on his way with Larry Barnes. Kevin was convinced that putting his faith in Larry Barnes was the right thing to do. Larry had verged on betraying Kevin when he fell under the sway of Vincent Reeves and was manipulated by Mason Zimmerman, who sought to get information about Kevin and his powers when he was establishing his empire in D.C. But Larry realized in time that it was Kevin who had been his champion and protector, who helped him to regain his herbalism confidence and skills, and enabled his rise from an herb vendor to become once again an esteemed herbalist. Kevin was sure that such a man would be the perfect person to oversee his lab. In Larry, there was now unwavering loyalty, life experience, and herbalism brilliance. Olivia knocked as she entered the space and greeted Kevin with, "Hey, this is my first day at work. I think I'm supposed to report to a Kevin?" Kevin laughed and shook her hand, welcoming her into their office. Kevin and Olivia went way back, it seemed, and yet it was only weeks since they'd met in D.C. and competed in the Herbalist Society competition. They were tried and true friends now, and Kevin appreciated Olivia's work ethic as much as he appreciated her sense of humor. "What do you think of our new home?" He spun around, arms outspread, showing it off. Olivia nodded. "Not bad. Do I get an office?" Kevin pointed to a door that led to one of the corner offices. "It's all yours." Olivia squealed. "Perfect. I'll go set up." She shouldered her bag and disappeared into her office. Dalton and Larry appeared when the elevator opened and they stepped out into the office. Larry.
"Kevin, good to see you, my boy. This is quite the place you found yourself in. I was surprised to hear from you."
Kevin was glad to see that Larry no longer felt ashamed or sheepish around him. Larry Barnes's wounded spirit had been taken advantage of by evil forces, and Kevin knew not to hold a man to blame for being caught in a dangerous web. Kevin shook his hand. "You know you can always count on me to keep you in mind. I'm so glad you're here. We have a lot of work to do, and I can't do it without my team. Welcome aboard. Wait until you see the lab. It's so state-of-the-art that I've been marveling at it since I bought the place." Olivia reemerged from her office. "Larry, aren't you a sight for sore eyes?" Olivia came over to them and the two hugged. Larry said,
"Glad to see that we all survived that exploding furnace. Let's get the tour, Kevin."
Kevin led them around the entire floor, saving the laboratory for last. He knew they would love it. As he walked, he realized how lucky he was to get both of these people on his team. Olivia had caught Kevin's eye when they met. He could sense in her the kind of power and potential that he had at her age, and he knew that he could help her reach her potential quickly. He felt like a protective older brother to her, but she didn't need his protection. She could handle herself. Kevin had hated it when her family tried to make him marry her. He knew that Olivia deserved a true romantic love, but she would never get it from Kevin. He was too in love with his own wife, Lily, ever to let his eye fall on another woman. Kevin also knew that Olivia's father saw any union his daughter made more of a way of increasing his business connections than it was about finding happiness for his child. But that was all water under the bridge now. Now she was his friend and he was her mentor. "As you can see, everything we could ever need is here. Larry, take your time and get to know the space. I'm so excited to match herbalism with advanced technological medicine to create a cure for every ailment and a vaccine for every disease. Our team from the Healing Arts School will report to you, and they'll be yours to put to work on any experiments you do or pills you create. Just keep them safe," Kevin said, ending the tour at the front of the laboratory. Olivia pointed over Kevin's shoulder. "Is that the team?" Kevin spun around. Indeed, 6 people in their early 20s were standing in the hallway, milling around and waiting to be invited in. Kevin pushed a button to open the door and said, "Come on in, everyone. Let's all get acquainted." They filed in and sat around the large blacktop lab table. "It's good to have you here. Before you are 2 of the most talented herbalists in the world. You will learn from them, you will obey them, and with them, you will become great." Kevin indicated for the one nearest him to stand up. "Introduce yourself, please." This student was clean-cut and professional, his shirt and pants impeccably tailored. Kevin could tell he had a background in something like finance or law, the way he held himself with such confidence. "My name is Mehdi. I'm 25 years old and I'm from New Jersey. I've been studying herbalism for a year now with a concentration in longevity of treatments. I want to cure chronic illness." Everyone greeted him with hellos and the next student stood up. This one had a mane of bushy blonde hair and was dressed in slacks and a sensible blouse that could go well under a lab coat. I'm Maura. I'm 21 and I'm from Dublin. I've been studying herbalism since I was 18 and I hope to develop a prenatal medicine that will ensure a perfect and complication-free pregnancy. The next two students stood up and Kevin realized they were identical twins. I'm Yuki. This is Hiro. We're from Kyoto, and our parents are herbalists, so we grew up studying it as well. I want to create the ultimate painkiller that prevents you from feeling unnecessary pain ever again. Hiro nodded. And I want to cure heartbreak. Everyone chuckled, and he blushed. The next student stood up. She was much more casual than the others and had the vibe of someone who spends all night in the lab and all day resting up for the next night. Hi everyone, I'm Zara. I haven't been in herbalism long, but I learned fast. My background is in coding and engineering, and I want to create a pill that turns our brain's ability to recognize patterns so we can analyze data and progress in technology twice as fast. I would be able to make humankind's next 20 years of advancements happen in 10. The last student stood up. She was the closest to Kevin in age, but she had a far-off look in her eyes that made her look timeless. I'm Amber. I've been at the school for a few years now, and I've been studying Kevin's work since he left the Healing Arts School. I have a lot of theories for you on extending and enhancing the effects of your pills. I'm ready to put them into practice. Thank you all, again, for being here. Larry will be your boss, and Olivia will be his right arm and the person you can pester with your questions and problems. She works closely with me, so you'll likely find her wherever you find me. Take a minute to get acquainted with the space. Then, Larry, put them to work.
Will do, Kevin.
Kevin and Olivia left them to it and convened in Kevin's private office. Kevin had big plans for this space. It would be his war room, his personal lab, and the heart of his business. He was picturing a captain's cabin on a ship, ornately carved furniture, texts lining the walls as old as 1,000 years, with herbalist knowledge in them handed down for centuries. Right now, however, all he had was a desk and a chair, so he and Olivia stood. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. How are you finding being in Chicago so far? Olivia rolled her eyes. It's lovely this time of year. Tell me what's been happening with you. Why were Larry and I called to action? Kevin realized he hadn't had the chance to give her the full story. Kessler is back. Mario returned to Chicago. What? Why? Kevin spread his arms. You're looking at why. He's here to kill me. But he wants to ruin my empire first. This company is going to be under threat from him and the traitor Ethan Williams. I wanted to get us up and running before he found us, but be on guard. Olivia's eyes widened. That would have been good to know before I came from D.C. Kevin reassured her. The Radiance is keeping tabs on Kessler and Ethan as we speak, and they're guarding the building. They're also guarding my wife Lily and her friend Rachel, and I'll assign a team of them to you and Larry full-time too. No one will touch you as long as they're there. But I want you to know that we have to be careful. So we're not endangering the students? Olivia asked. Kevin shook his head. Of course not. Wayne Ford and Harley Shepard sent them here personally, so they'll be keeping an eye out. Between them and the Radiance, they're safer here than nearly anywhere else in the world. Olivia nodded. Okay. That hotel you put me up in is lush, by the way. Kevin smiled. Thank you. Lily's friend Rachel runs it, and she does a bang-up job. I'm sure you'll be very comfortable there. Rachel will probably try and get you to come for movie nights with her and Lily, so keep an eye out for that. Olivia laughed, and they headed for the door to go back out to their wider office. When they opened the door, however, Kevin was shocked to see his wife Lily standing in the reception area. Lily! He ran over and embraced her. I'm so glad to see you. How are you feeling? What are you doing here? I was just coming to see if you were all right. You didn't come home last night, and I've been so worried. Kevin kissed her. I should have sent Dalton to warn you. I'm sorry, I had to take care of something. But now I'll just be in the office for the rest of the afternoon, and I'll be home like normal. Lily wasn't looking at Kevin, though. She was looking past him and staring right at the young, beautiful girl who was obviously very comfortable with Kevin. Olivia. Lily had just arrived at Kevin's new lab when she saw Kevin leaving his office with Olivia after a brief one-on-one meeting, and she felt uneasy about Olivia being so close to her husband. Kevin had brought Olivia back to Chicago from Washington, D.C. because, as his protege, he needed her help with the new pharmaceutical company he had just started. "Lily, it's so good to see you." Olivia rushed over to Lily and Kevin with her hand outstretched to shake Lily's. She could tell Lily was suspicious of her already and wanted to put forward a friendly impression that said, "Don't worry, I'm not into your husband." But Lily pretended she didn't see Olivia's outstretched hand. "So, this is the new office? It's incredible, Kevin." Lily shifted her weight to try and exclude Olivia from the circle, but Olivia was insistent on getting Lily to like and trust her, so she stepped even closer to them both. "How about I show you around? The laboratory is the real jewel in this crown. You would be so amazed at the technology Kevin has filled it with," Olivia said. Lily looked at her again, still very stiff. "That's okay. I'm actually here for a private conversation with my husband, if you don't mind." "Okay, I'll be in the lab." Olivia left without argument, and Kevin turned to Lily. "Is everything okay?" He could tell that she had been cold to Olivia and wanted to reassure her. "Why is Olivia here? Is she something I need to worry about?" Lily asked, her arms crossed in front of her. Kevin shook his head and kissed his wife. "Of course not. She's my apprentice and she'll be assisting me in my work, but I can promise you it's nothing more than that. No woman could ever compare to you, and honestly, I'm not even looking to make a comparison. I know I already have the Hope Diamond of wives. Olivia is smart, but she's like a sister to me. I want to help her in her career so one day she can move on beyond my work and fly on her own. I love you." Lily softened and uncrossed her arms, now looking a little embarrassed. "I suppose I owe her an apology. She is very sweet, isn't she?" Kevin grinned and brought Lily into his office. "Yeah, she's the kind of person you don't mind seeing first thing in the morning when you get to work and you're grumpy and tired. It's nice to have her here, but more important, what are you doing here? It's great to see you, but is everything okay?" Kevin offered Lily his chair and he leaned against his desk while she spoke. "I don't think I can stay at home alone anymore. I was up all night too tense and nervous to sleep. You were gone and I didn't feel safe. I kept thinking I could see Officer Emmett or Renee Silver outside of my window. I'm still shaken up from when they kidnapped me and I think I'm becoming paranoid." Kevin nodded, holding Lily's hand. He could see where she was coming from. Since he had begun his empire, she had been kidnapped, put in a coma, threatened, and harassed by his enemies, and it was something he felt great guilt about. He was building his empire and studying herbalism all for the sake of securing a good future for himself and his wife. But in the process, he was risking it all. If he could work Lily into the fold somehow and give her some independence of her own, she might feel more empowered and less vulnerable. "First of all, I'm so glad you came to tell me this. I understand why you're afraid, but if it makes you feel any better, I've assigned a security detail to guard you from a distance at all times. So if anyone is coming after you, they'll have to go through your guards first. Besides, Officer Emmett and Renee Silver are still afraid of me from our last interaction. They wouldn't risk putting you in danger again. They know I'll be on them before they can reach you," he told her. Lily sighed. "That does make me feel a little bit better, but still, all those hours at home alone make my mind wander to some dark places and I'm scared. I want to be around you. It's not home if you're not there." Kevin started brainstorming. He was still under pressure, knowing that Mario Kessler and Ethan Williams were plotting against him. He couldn't just stop working at the pharmaceutical company and stay home with Lily all day as much as he wanted to be there. And he couldn't worry her with the Kessler news. He just had to work hard to establish his company before they could stop him by blocking permissions from Washington, D.C. Okay, let's figure something out. I know you're not interested in working here making pharmaceuticals. Is there anything you would like to do? I'll help you set up anything you want. Now that you're healthy again and rested, going back to work might help take your mind off of your fears and engage in something you're passionate about. Lily thought about it too. I always loved the idea of giving back. You've been so successful and I'm so proud of you, but now you have the kind of money that can make real change. Have you ever thought about that? Kevin felt a light bulb go off in his head. You're onto something. Do you mind if we include Olivia in this discussion? She can help. Lily nodded, eager to show makeup for how she had treated Olivia when she first arrived. Kevin led Lily to a conference room across the floor and called out, Olivia, got a sec? Olivia came out of the lab within a few moments and joined them in the conference room. She still had her sunny face on, convinced to make Lily like her, but Lily greeted her this time with a hug. I hear you're the backbone of this operation. Thank you for keeping Kevin at the top of his game. They laughed and sat down, and Kevin caught Olivia up. I think it's time we bring Lily into the fold of my empire. I want to set up a subsidiary for this business that can, her idea, give back. Do you know anything about how we could do that? Olivia's eyes lit up. Of course. We can set up a charity to funnel a percentage of your profits from the pharmaceuticals into whatever causes you want to fight for, Lily. We can hold galas and pageants and parties for big donors. It will be incredible PR for the company, and it will do good all over the city and beyond. Lily was getting excited now too, and Kevin was grateful that the two of them were getting along. He could see why Lily would feel threatened by Olivia, but he had been honest when he said Olivia was like a sister to him, and he was grateful that Lily believed him. Plus, with Lily busy at this new charity, he would have more time to focus on producing the best medicines he could make. Then, when he and Lily both got off a long day at work, they would appreciate each other's time and attention even more and focus on their marriage. Lily turned to Kevin and grabbed his hand. This is perfect. Think of the legacy we could leave behind with both of our endeavors. This would set a great example for our future children and teach them not only the value of hard work, but the value of giving back and caring for others. Kevin squeezed her fingers in his. I think this is an amazing idea. I'm so proud of you. And we can throw a kickoff event to introduce the charity to the world at the hotel I'm staying in. It's so high-end and luxurious and would attract the attention of all sorts of incredible people who can partner with us on it, Olivia suggested. Kevin agreed. Yes, Lily, Olivia's staying in Rachel's hotel until she can find her own place. You and Rachel and Olivia could plan the whole thing. I bet Rachel would appreciate the business and would be thrilled to help you out. Lily nodded, already on her phone sending a text to her best friend. Meanwhile, Kevin's own phone chimed and vibrated in his pocket, and he pulled it out to see a text message from Brett Stewart, leader of the Myriads. Got a sec? It's urgent. Kevin excused himself from the table, leaving Olivia and Lily to keep planning the charity together, thrilled that they were getting along but now nervous about what Brett could want. Brett was currently hosting Kevin's parents down in St. Louis, keeping them safe and unaware of the dangers they were in merely for being connected to Kevin. As the leader of the Myriads, he possessed a lot of power, and Kevin knew Brett wouldn't call for his help for nothing. He dialed the number and Brett picked up. Hey, Kevin. Situation down. Fast can you get to St. Louis? Kevin held the phone away from his ear and checked the signal. He had 5 bars. The connection issue was on Brett's end. Brett, I can't hear you, man. Where are you? What's wrong? Brett didn't seem to be able to hear Kevin well either. You need... compromised. You need to come... Parents. Brett, I can't hear you. What did you say? Is everything okay? Who's compromised? Brett tried one last time. Your parents. Help! Your parents are in... The line dissolved into more thick static and the call dropped. The panic in Kevin's heart grew. His parents had long been in danger because of Kevin's rise in power and wealth, but all of that would be meaningless if those very things brought about tragedy. Were they in danger now? That's what Kevin was sure he heard, and it gave him fear deep in his heart. Kevin stared at his phone. He had just been cut off from a phone call with Myriad head Brett Stewart where it sounded like Brett was telling him his parents were in trouble. His parents had been staying with Brett down in St. Louis to keep them safe from all of Kevin's enemies, but now they were compromised, and Brett needed him down in St. Louis as soon as possible. Kevin tried to remain calm. Brett had said it was urgent after all, but if there was a physical threat looming, surely Brett and the Myriads would be able to keep the attackers at bay until Kevin could come help. Brett could handle himself, and only called in Kevin when he needed Kevin's special power levels and set of skills. All Kevin knew was that time was ticking, and he needed to leave. He dashed back to the conference room where Olivia and Lily were planning out Lily's new charity. "Something's come up. I have to go down to St. Louis and make sure my parents are okay. Can you two hold down the fort here?" Olivia and Lily promised they would, and Kevin made off for the airport. When he arrived in St. Louis, he walked up to Brett's home, scanning the perimeter for signs of a struggle or hidden assassins. Brett had one of his many homes in a neighborhood near the Mississippi River, not quite downtown but not quite in the city. The 3-story townhome functioned as a residence for Brett, but also a safe house for Myriads or other people in their circle who needed to hide out for a period of time. Recently, that included Kevin's parents, Alan and Susan Williams, who had taken over the 3rd floor. The yard was small and green. St. Louis was a flat terrain with heavy air but a clear sky, and Kevin decided he would be able to see a threat coming from pretty far away. He plugged in the code to the door that Brett had disclosed to him when his parents first moved in. Kevin entered the front door with caution. "Keep your head low and your power in your chest," Kevin reminded himself. But as soon as he stepped inside, Brett appeared in front of him, shaking his hand. "Kevin, thank you so much for coming down. Sorry about the phone call. We've had to disconnect all of our lines of communication, and I was trying to contact you before that happened." "How are my parents? You said they were in danger." Kevin could hardly hold the words inside himself. "Danger? Oh, I said they were in desperate need of seeing you. I'm sorry, the phone line must have died at a bad moment. There is some danger. We've been compromised. This safe house is no longer safe, and while we are confident that the threat is not immediate, we do need to vacate the premises as soon as we can." Brett led Kevin into the dining room, which had been converted into a war room. A few Myriads were scattered around trying to track the threat on monitors and securing the next accommodations. Others rushed around the home, throwing the necessary items into boxes to bring with them. "What's your goal for departure? Where are you going?" Kevin asked. Brett looked around him. "As soon as we get all packed up, we want to leave by tonight and be on our way to Florida. That's the next location. Our team conducted a lot of research, and the terrain there is optimal for defense. They'll have their Radiance team with them full-time to keep them safe, of course." Kevin was confused. "Sorry, they? Your parents? Oh, the whole operation isn't going to Florida? I thought the whole house was compromised." Brett nodded. "It is, but we have another house we will be moving to in Nashville. Your parents are better off being housed separately from the organization for right now. When we get settled, we'll send for them again." "Where are they, by the way? Can I see them?" Kevin asked, looking around too. "Upstairs packing. Go for it." Kevin climbed the stairs, and they creaked as he went. He made it to the top floor landing and knocked on the door. His father, Alan, opened it and burst into a huge smile. "Kevin, how are you, my boy?" Kevin entered the room with him and greeted his mother, whose arms were laden with stacks of laundry ready to be packed. "Honey, it's so good to see you," Susan said, so happy to see her son. "It's good to see you guys too. What do you know about the situation happening downstairs?" Kevin sat down on the bare mattress left on their bed and watched as they wandered around the room grabbing their things. "We know we're being moved to Florida. I'll be honest, I'm excited about it. Your mom and I haven't been to the beach in years. I might learn how to surf," Alan said. Susan smiled at him. We're excited for the new adventure, and we might be closer to you now. It's a closer flight to D.C.
Kevin felt guilty. He hadn't spoken to his parents in so long, and he had a lot to fill them in on. But he didn't want to tell them enough to worry them. I'm afraid I'm not in Washington, D.C. anymore. I just moved back to Chicago. Lily and I are starting a new business. Well, I'm starting a business, and she's starting a subsidiary to that business. Alan set down what he was packing. I hate to think that this rift with Thomas and your situation with the family is going to be permanent. Blood is thicker than water, Kevin. Even if Thomas was, well, a rattlesnake, it might be in your best interest to forgive and forget. Susan nodded. Starting a new business in this economy seems like a real risk, honey. What happened? Kevin didn't know where to begin. He was surprised that his parents were able to think that the situation with Thomas could be repaired. Thomas had, after all, ousted Alan and Sue when Kevin was exiled from the family business, and he was the reason that they were stuck in St. Louis. But they also believed family was important, unaware of just how sinister the feud between them had become. I've split from Thomas, permanently. He has betrayed me too many times. The whole power structure of the Williams Company was not something I could respect any longer. There are too many people who want the power, and they'll do anything to get it. That's not what family is about, and Thomas lost sight of that long before I did. I cut ties with him completely and came back to Chicago to prioritize my marriage and the well-being of my wife Lily, Kevin explained, now helping pile his parents' belongings into their suitcases. They didn't have much, but they weren't as fast-moving as they had been in their younger days, and it made him feel better to be able to help out. Well, if that's what you need to do, honey, then we trust you. But are you sure there's no working things out with Thomas? Maybe you could be the one to effect change at the Williams Company. You could fix it from the inside, and then we would have assurance that you're safe and employed with family. Susan insisted. Kevin didn't know how to make them understand without worrying them. He's not my family anymore. You are. Lily is. We need to look to the future, not the past. I want to keep the circle small. Only people I trust are allowed in. All right, son. Tell us about this new business. Alan zipped up one of the suitcases and joined his son at the foot of the bed. It's pretty exciting, actually. You know I've been studying herbalism, and I'm devising ways to combine those practices with technological advancements in pharmaceuticals and make medicine that will be able to eradicate disease, cure cancer, stop chronic pain, anything we can think of. Susan beamed. That's great, Kevin. I'm so proud of you. And what is Lily doing for this company? Lily is starting a charitable charity so that she can put the money I make to good use. In fact, as we speak, she's designing the plans for the charity and researching causes that we can contribute to, Kevin said, taking the rest of the clothes from his mother's hands and finishing the packing for her so she could sit down and take a break. It does sound like a nice idea. I think she will really take to that, you know. Lily has such a good heart. Alan looked to his wife, who agreed. But with both of you so busy at these new jobs, don't you worry that you might forget to settle down? You're building something great, but you don't have anyone to leave it to. Susan lamented. Come on, Mom. Not this again. Kevin chuckled. I mean it. You're in your late 20s now. It's easy to get lost in your ambitions and say you'll put off having kids until later, but you don't want to be in a wheelchair at your child's high school graduation, do you? You should have those babies when you're young and have the energy for it. Kevin sighed. It's not that I don't want children, Mom. It's just that there are a lot of moving pieces happening right now, and it would be better to wait until things settle down. I want to make sure I'm bringing kids into a family that is safe, secure, and ready for them. You understand that, don't you? Kevin said these words partly because they were true, but partly to protect Lily from even more prying. It was hard enough to have Dorothy both trying to kill him and asking when he and Lily were going to have a baby. Kevin didn't want his own parents to be adding to the pressure on his beloved wife. Alan jumped in this time, clapping a hand on his son's shoulder. There's never going to be a perfect time for you to have them, Kevin.
You might think that there will be, but the time will keep passing no matter what you do to try and slow it down. Besides, when you do have babies running around, your mother and I will come back to Chicago too and help out when you and Lily get busy." Kevin smiled at his folks. Their generosity meant the world to him, but he knew it wouldn't be safe for them in Chicago for a long time. Not with Mario Kessler after him, Ethan Williams working with him, Joshua Hill still out to avenge Ethan's beating at Kevin's hands, and a countless others trying to take Kevin down. And if his parents wouldn't be safe there, a baby sure wouldn't be. Plus, the epic clash was coming up within a year. The epic clash had been in Kevin's mind ever since he won the Herbalist Society's competition in D.C. The epic clash loomed like a brass ring that he must grasp, especially because he knew that by winning it, he could get to the Upper Realm, which would assure his and Lily's eternal protection, and also lead him, perhaps, the headquarters of the Secluded Valley Assassins, who continued to lurk and create danger for him at every turn. He had to train for the epic clash. No, things like children would have to wait, but he just nodded. "Thank you for your advice. I really appreciate it. I'll talk to Lily. Have a great time in Florida. I'm so glad I was able to stop in before you left." On his way back downstairs to Brett, Kevin mulled over what his parents had told him. He knew that ultimately they were right. The family was everything, and his power and money were nothing with nobody to share it with. He really would talk to Lily when he got back. Maybe it was time to start a family of their own. Kevin found Brett back downstairs at the house in St. Louis where he had come to make sure his parents were doing okay. He had found out from Brett that the Myriads had been compromised and his parents were being relocated to Florida, while Brett was taking his operation with the Myriads to Nashville until further notice. Now that he had ensured his parents were safe, he had to get back home to Lily. Kevin's parents had given him a lot to think about regarding starting a family, and while he didn't think it was the right time, his dad had a point. It would never be the right time. "Brett, thanks for calling me. I'm grateful for the chance to have come to see my parents, and I'm grateful for you taking care of them. If you need anything else from me, I'm just a phone call away." Kevin shook Brett's hand, ready to leave, but Brett pulled him over to a spare bedroom. "Can we talk for a second?" Brett closed the door behind him and then turned to face Kevin. The air in the room felt very cold and serious. "What's up? Did something else happen?" Brett shook his head. "Not yet, but it might. The Myriads being compromised is just the first sign that something much worse is coming. We need you now more than ever." "What do you mean?" Kevin had already come down here and Brett told him the threat wasn't immediate. What could they need from him right now? "It's time for you to quit your day job and join up. Work with the Myriads full time. With your herbalism skills plus our numbers and sheer force, we would be unstoppable. No one would stand a chance." Kevin shook his head. "You know I'm your ally, Brett, but I can't do that. I've just started this new business and Lily is recovering from an attack. There's too much going on in Chicago for me to up and leave to join you. It's a really generous offer, but I have to decline." Brett looked annoyed at this answer. He pursed his lips, then said, "I don't think you're understanding the gravity of the situation, Kevin. Herbalism isn't just some hobby that you've picked up and found great success in. You have a gift. You are a once-in-a-generation talent. The pills you've made to improve yourself are unprecedented, and the stakes around here are only getting higher. You don't bench the star player during the championship game, and you certainly don't let the best herbalist in the country say no to joining the Myriads." Kevin held his hands up. "I want to help you, and I'll be at your beck and call when things go left, but I'm telling you, this isn't my life. I have ambitions of my own to achieve even greater heights and cause greater change for good in this world. I don't mean to sound like a jerk, but my priorities are elsewhere. I'm especially focused on my wife, Lily, and joining the Myriads full-time would keep me from focusing on my marriage." Brett scoffed. "Your marriage? Do you hear yourself? The enemy is closing in. The Foundation is at risk of being overtaken. We're on the verge of war here, Kevin, and we need everyone to step up." Kevin paced the room, trying to figure out what to say, and what the right thing to do really was. Maybe it was time to take a step back from his own ambitions and join the cause. But his ambitions would ultimately lead to helping the cause as well as affecting the greater good. And no matter what was happening in the wider world, Lily would always be more important. Besides, when he was facing the assassins that Mario Kessler had sent after him the other day, he could feel his levels depleting. He had to take the time to make himself stronger, and that could mean anything from training in the gym to creating new pills that would power him up for a longer time. His current endurance level wouldn't do him any favors on the front lines. "I promise to help in any capacity I can, but I won't enlist with you like it's the army. My people need me in Chicago. Truce?" Kevin held out his hand to shake Brett's, but Brett only shook his head. "When are you going to get real and do something really great? Beating the pinnacle will be a history-defining moment. Wasting your time at some company won't cement your legacy. This war will." Kevin finally decided to just tell Brett the truth and get him off his back. "I can't, all right? My first priority has to be Lily, and I'm now facing a pair of enemies in Chicago who have aligned and are threatening her, my empire, and my future. If I leave to join the Myriads, I would fear that my absence would enable them to ruin what I've built for Lily. I'm going to train, invent new pills, and then finally compete in the epic clash. When I win and ascend to the upper realm, that's what will truly make me unstoppable in whatever war comes our way. All right?" Brett didn't seem satisfied, but he didn't argue any further. "Fine. Go back to Chicago. We'll see you soon, I'm sure." Kevin said one more goodbye to his parents and got on a flight back to Chicago. He made it back to the new office in time to see everyone finishing up their workday. A quick trip to the lab showed him that the Healing Arts School students he had employed were already off to the races. Under Larry Barnes' guidance, they had begun extracting elements from various herbs and distilling them down to their purest form, in order to incorporate them into other medicines with the fewest variables possible in each experiment. "Yuki, Hiro, why don't you tell Kevin about what you're working on?" Larry suggested, getting the twins to look up from their experiment, only to realize that Kevin was there watching them. "Hello, Mr. Williams." "Oh, please, call me Kevin," Kevin said with a charming smile. "Right. Well, Kevin, I'm working on a method to isolate the acidity in the sulfur deposits to make use of them. Sulfur, as you probably know, is a smelly byproduct of crude gas, but it can be used to extract minerals. So we are turning it into a tool for future processes," Hiro explained. Kevin looked over to Yuki, who was grinding up a green leaf with a mortar and pestle. "And what are you doing?" "I'm grinding up mint to add to the sulfur so it doesn't stink up the whole lab," Yuki grinned. "Excellent. As you were, gentlemen." Larry brought Kevin over to Medi next. "Status report, son?" "Hey, Larry. Hey, Kevin. I'm turning some of these raw herbs into tinctures so they're more concentrated and easier to manipulate when we marry them with the other methods of medicine." "What method are you using?" Kevin asked, his eyes feasting on the beautiful array of herbs and barks in front of Medi. "Percolation." "That's complicated," Kevin remarked. "It is, but it's also very fast and efficient. And if I may, with the amount of practice I have in it, I'm very confident that it will work." Medi nodded. "Well then, I won't keep you from it. Good work." They visited a couple of other students and ended up at Mora's table. "Mora, good day so far?" Mora nodded. "Just cleaning up. We were sequencing DNA earlier to test a theory." "What's the theory?" "That this little concoction I made can improve the symptoms of Fragile X syndrome," Mora said proudly. "As you were." Kevin nodded. He dropped Larry off back at his desk and left the lab, crossing the floor toward his office, when he realized Olivia and Lily were still in the conference room where he left them hours and hours ago. He joined them. "What in the world are you both still doing here? Go home. The day is over." They looked up at him and Olivia said, "Hey, Welcome back. Everything squared away? Kevin nodded. All set. The crisis was averted as usual. How's the charity planning going? Lily beamed. It's incredible. We've already registered the charity and licensed the name. We were just talking about the launch event at Rachel's hotel. We need to go pay her a visit and sit down to plan it out. I can't wait. Olivia nodded in agreement. I already have a guest list in my head. That's incredible. Great work, you two. Kevin came in and sat down with them. He was going to ask to talk to Lily privately, but figured he could fill them both in. It was only helpful that Olivia stayed apprised of every movement or threat. So I was just called to St. Louis by Brett Stewart, head of the Myriads. Their location was compromised, so they're being shuffled around, but my parents still have their Radiance details, so now they're safe again. And Brett is worried. He thinks it's a sign of something worse to come. Like what? Olivia asked. Like a war. I don't know if I believe it yet, but I'm going to get stronger. Olivia, I'll need your help. With what? Kevin made up his mind. I'm going to build a training center here. I and anyone who joins my cause will be skilled to the highest levels physically and mentally. I intend to be nothing short of unstoppable, so no one can ever again threaten the safety of Lily and my family.